Hi, in this video I want to talk really quickly about SVG elements. So strictly speaking, SVG elements are not HTML, so that's an interesting thing about them. I want to talk about them in the HTML series though, because you'll use them in HTML, first of all. Second of all, I want to talk about them because they're very important for good-looking websites. You can use SVGs a lot. So really quickly, SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphic. So what it is it's a series of XML specifications that lets the browser know, and really not just a browser, but especially very often a browser, it lets it know how to construct a shape. So we're going to use a circle here as an example because it's pretty simple, a pretty simple shape, but you can do very complex and detailed and beautiful graphics and artwork with SVGs, and a lot of times people do that and they don't really even know that they're using an SVG. So really quickly, the SVG element, because it's still an element even though it's really not strictly an HTML element, or what's inside it is not really strictly HTML. Its name is SVG for Scalable Vector Graphic. It has a width and height attribute which define the width and height of the total image. So if you were to have something go inside of the SVG, have coordinates that go outside of the SVG, it'll be cut off based off of these width and height attributes. Then inside it, you put the specifications for every shape or line or fill you want to create. So here we have a circle element that is self-closing. We give the coordinate of the x component of the center. So here's the circle center. This is 110 pixels from the side here of the SVG and 110 pixels from the top. That's where we get the center x and center y coordinates. This circle has a radius of 100 pixels. The stroke, so the outside here, has a color in RGB format with hex codes. You can also just put pink or any other pre-recognized color right there. It has a stroke width, so this stroke has a certain width. If we put 6D, you could see that would be quite a different stroke. We'll go back to 6. And then it has a fill color, and again, you could use any color you want here. Now I'd like to go over more specifically some of the components of SVGs, how you can build more complicated artwork with SVGs, and a lot of the places you might want to go to do that. You probably don't want to do all of this coding by yourself, because as the artwork gets more complex, it gets a lot harder to do in code, but there are editors and sorts of things like Adobe Illustrator or Inkscape that will let you create using a very friendly sort of GUI. They'll let you create an SVG. But we'll go over how the syntax of SVGs work, and they are incredibly useful for web design, so it's worth knowing. Another thing that's worth knowing is within an image tag, you can actually specify an SVG file as a source. So if you put this in a plain text file, and then you upload that to the server, mysvg.svg, give it an SVG file, an SVG file extension, you can actually link it. Now if I had an SVG called mysvg on the server, it would show up as an image right here. So that's another option for using SVGs. One of the main benefits of using an SVG is exactly what the name implies, scalable vector graphic. If you have an SVG, you can make this bigger, smaller, and no matter what, it's going to stay, the image will stay just as sharp, because it's actually telling the computer essentially, it's giving it an equation or a series of mathematical equations for determining where the precise location of all of these, and so it's not specifying pixels. So if you drag it out and make it giant, it's going to be just as crisp on a website as as it would be if you had originally created it at that size. So that's one of the reasons why SVGs are extremely useful, and I would encourage you to use them wherever it makes sense.